Joe Milakovic, also known as Hollywood Joe, will give a speech entitled Inspiration to Tell Your Story. He will be sharing some personal stories and teaching you how to tell your story. Joe is an international inspirational speaker and active Toastmaster, passionate about speaking and zooming through the U.S. and Canada, giving over 80 speeches in 90 days, an ultra-marathon trail runner. Please help me welcome Joe. Yay.
Once upon a time, in a galaxy far, far away, was a young android child named Data. One night, Data asked the captain of the ship to show him a PowerPoint. Meanwhile, back on Earth, no human child would ever say, "Show me a PowerPoint." They would say, "Mommy, tell me a story. Daddy, tell me a story. Mr. Hollywood, please tell me a story." Okay, lean in. Listen carefully. Are you listening? Are you really listening? This is a very personal story today. Last year in June, I joined Toastmasters again after a long break, and I wanted to get better. So I came up with this wild, crazy idea to attend 90 Toastmasters meetings in 90 days. It's 90 days straight. And part of that, while I was journeying and traveling, speaking across the country, in Canada, I decided to speak in every state. That became part of the new goal. Give a speech in every state, and I did. Now, what the problem with that is 90 days, I got to fill up 90 days worth of meetings. I had my own club meetings that fill up some days, but I had to repeat some states. So I went to Oregon once, and I didn't really meet anybody exciting. One person, I actually attended one of his classes. So what happens in that time, in 90 days, I met well over 800 people in that time. So I can't remember much. It's got to really catch my attention to remember you. Nothing personal about anybody, but that's that many people. So what happened, I went to a second club in Oregon, and one of the people there was invited by her friend that she walks with, and she just happened to fill a role. They needed, Toastmasters has roles to fill. She filled a role. And for the first time ever, she just so happened to wear bunny ears on her head because her role was the listener. They do a little quiz during some of these meetings. So the listener said, "I'm all ears, the listener." Now that got my attention. I haven't seen that in 80 some days at that point. So we chatted a little bit because it got my attention, of course. So the next day I received an email from her that invited me to attend her Advanced Evaluations Toastmasters Club. Like, sure, I'm going to take advantage of an opportunity to speak. And the beautiful thing was the email said, "You can call me or email me." And normally she wouldn't say call me to a stranger, but she did. She felt safe. I called because I'm on the computer all the time. My eyes were hurting, so I was glad to be a phone call. And boy, did we connect. First time, we talked a long time. Next day was the last day, the 90th day of the Toastmasters meeting. And I invited her. We actually talked about an idea. I implemented an idea, a new Zoom idea, and it worked well. So again, it was already started a friendship and a mentorship right off the bat. She came to that meeting, tried the idea. Next day, we talked about it, found out more commonality between us, and we became friends. Later on, she became a mentor. We'd work on speeches together through Zoom, where I was in Illinois. She was in another western part of the country, but we communicated on Zoom. And we'd practice and make it Hollywood style, whatever we worked on. Then later on, I was invited to HIGI. I met Bywin Lee at her Toastmasters Club, invited to HIGI to speak last December was the first time. So my friend started attending HIGI. Matter of fact, she became Bywin's mentor as well. So the person I'm talking about, many of you are familiar with, is Sheila LaChance, who's also spoke here at HIGI. Matter of fact, last year, she self-published a book, Musings of a Madman I Married, Inspiration to Tell Your Story. Inspiration to tell your story. After 4 months of emails, phone calls, Zoom calls, we finally met in person. We call it the trip of a lifetime. Fast forward, Hollywood Joe moved to the Hollywood district of Portland, Oregon, western part of the country. I'm excited. Are you excited? Now, I personalized the quote from her book, the introduction, which you'll hear later, the actual quote, but my modified quote says, I shared my story with Sheila. That invited her to share her story. Our stories connected us, and both of us craved connection. To connect us to love, and understanding our stories was the beginning of a love that never ends. In other words, sharing my story made a strong connection, and telling my story was the beginning of a love that never ends. So when you give a speech or a presentation, never make a point without telling a story. Never tell a story without making a point. Never make a point without telling a story, and never tell a story without making a point. Oh, wait, somebody wants to talk to you.
Oh, that somebody is me, the professor. You might have seen me in a previous speech, but here I am with Hollywood Joe, and I have a question, because professors are very curious. Why? Why never tell a story without making a point? Why is that so important? Please tell me more, Hollywood Joe, tell me more.
Well, Professor, in the book, The 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos, Canadian author Dr. Jordan Peterson wrote, for rule number 10, be precise in your words. Why precise? To connect, of course. Mindfully ask yourself the message or point you wish to make. Do your best to be succinct and purposeful. Once your point is made, support it with a story. Make it personal, make it real, make it clear, and make it genuine. Make your point. As Dr. Peterson wrote, what's my point? Be precise in your speech, and remember, never make a point without telling a story, and never tell a story without making a point. Oh my, again, Professor? Professor wants to say something again.
Okay, Hollywood, I think I get it. I think I get your point. It's to connect, right? To connect, we need to connect with one another. But now I must ask a pivotal question. Where do we tell our stories? I'm not a Toastmaster. My mouth is sewn up because I'm a puppet and someone else has to talk for me. Oh, that's preposterous. So tell me, Mr. Joe, Mr. Hollywood, whatever your name is today, tell me where?
Well, Professor, you can tell your story in multiple places. Think of communications as having multiple vehicles. We'll talk about two of those vehicles. Written stories, personal letters, articles, blogs, books, and social media. Spoken, face-to-face, family gatherings, parties, phone conversations, social gatherings, virtual meetings, speeches, educational presentations, and so much more. See, you don't need to be a speaker to tell your story. You can tell your story. Oh, it's the pesky, persistent professor again. And yes, the professor loves alliterations.
All right, then. I get it. You told me why. That's to connect. You told me where and all these different vehicles and ways I can tell where I can tell my story. But you missed something big. How do I tell my story? Tell me how. How now, brown cow? Tell me how.
How? How? You really want to know how? Well, hold on, and I will not only tell you how, I will let everyone know. I will teach you how. Okay, using the acronym TEACH. T is tell your story. From the book Musings of a Madman I Married, Inspiration to tell your story, Sheila wrote this introduction. Sharing your story invites others to share their story. Stories connect us, and human nature craves connection. To connect is to love, and understanding our stories is the beginning of a love that never ends. Emotion. Emotions connect, and human nature craves connection. Poet Maya Angelou wrote, "People will not remember what you say, but will remember how you made them feel." People will not remember what you say, but how you make them feel. Researchers Daniel and Chip Heath discovered that after a presentation, only 5% remember statistics, while 63% remember stories. Do you want to be remembered? A is for authentic. Authenticity in your story helps build your credibility and helps you connect with others. Oscar Wilde said, "Be yourself. Everyone else is taken." Give yourself permission to be real and genuine in your stories. A good story has a conflict and resolution. Think of a movie or a TV show, especially American sitcoms. You have a problem beginning and magically within 22 minutes, it's solved. Conflict resolution. See the problem, see it being overcome. And then a great movie always has heroes and heroines, and you see them progress. You see them change. You see their challenges. You see them grow. See them overcome. So here's another story for you. I call this one the Julie Challenge story, or the power of a promise. The power of a promise. See, in 2017, I didn't feel good every day. See what happens, I was 208 pounds at only 5 foot 4.5 inches. That's very heavy overweight. I was tired. I just felt down, felt low because I was tired. I wasn't moving enough. I was on the computer all day and night. I felt terrible. So one day in my office came along Julie. Julie and I had a good conversation. I explained to her, I just told her the story of what was going on. And she came up with an idea. She just didn't challenge me. She asked me to promise her. So again, the power of a promise. She said, "Joe, I want you to promise me that you will walk for 20 to 25 minutes a day, every other day for a week." And I did. Let me tell you, it was a good thing she asked me to promise her, not challenge me, or I probably wouldn't have stuck with it because it was hard. It was very hard at the beginning. Always the hardest part was getting started. Once I got started, I was good. So I decided to try the challenge for a second week. My goodness, couldn't believe, unbelievable, the energy I got and the mood changes. So, then I had such bad moods as I had more bad days than good. Now I was having good days and lots of good days, had energy, felt so much better. So that is the power of a promise. Now I'm going to go off screen again. Now somebody different wants to talk to you. So hang on. Class, pay attention, class. Listen up. I'm watching you. I'm watching to see if you're paying attention. You're paying attention. Pay attention. All right. Let's see how Hollywood did with following his own storytelling rules. Tell your story. You heard it. Hollywood Joe told his personal story, his struggles, his victory. Emotion. Did you witness Hollywood's emotions? How was experiencing empathy for his situation? And joy for his victory. Authentic. Did Hollywood Joe make a connection? Did he create credibility? Was he real? Was he genuine? I think so. Conflict resolution. Hollywood Joe talked about his problems and overcoming them. Heroes, of course. It was Julie and Hollywood Joe. He had a hero's journey. Hollywood gets an A, or pronounced A in Canada. Now, back to Hollywood Joe. Thanks, Teach. And thanks for the A. Once upon a time, in a galaxy far, far away, the Android child was shown a PowerPoint. However, now that he learned the importance of sharing personal stories, he no longer wants to see a PowerPoint. He wants you to tell your story. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the child said, "Mommy, tell me a story. Daddy, tell me a story." Now, it's your turn to tell your story.